Hello, and welcome to my page, The Master Resident, where we are currently in the middle of a series on how to get into the MBRU residency. Now, if you are new here and you are hearing the terminology MBRU residency for the first time, then I highly recommend that you go to part 1 of this series and then go through what it is and then see if that's something that interests you. And if it is, try to follow the sequence of 1, 2, 3, depending on, you can filter out a few things if you feel like you don't need them. For example, part 3 is mainly intended for graduates from India, so you can skip that if you're not a graduate from India, and then you can move on. But regardless, I do feel like if you go through all the series 1 to 3, 4, 5, then it'll be easier for you to appreciate this particular video and follow what we're talking about here in part 6, in which we will be talking about the specialty interview. Now, if you have already been following me and the video series, and if you're just here for part 6, welcome back. And without further ado, we will dive into the main content of the video, which is the specialty interview. Now, I feel like this might be maybe a briefer video, I hope, than the other two, because there's not really too much that I have to talk about in a specialty interview in terms of the process and what it is. So this video will most likely just be a brief orientation of what the specialty interview consists of, but we'll talk a bit more on how to prepare for it, or can you prepare for it, and what to expect, and these kind of personal touches from my side. Okay, now, as we know, quick recap again, there is basically 3 phases to the acceptance into residency program. So we have the phase 1, which was the shortlisting, which we discussed in part 4, and then we have the phase 2, which is the MMI, which we discussed in part 5. So this is the phase 3, which is the specialty interviews that we're going to discuss. Now, what exactly is the specialty interview? It's fairly simple. As we know, in the application form, we have to actually select 2 specialties which are of our interest, right? So you have a specialty 1 and a specialty 2, or a choice 1 and a choice 2. Now, after you send out the applications and they shortlist you, and after you attend the MMI and you get a decent score, if you are eligible score-wise and performance-wise, you will get an invite to attend a specialty interview with your option 1 or option 2 specialty, or sometimes even both. To clarify, let's say for myself, and this is actually based on true events, in my application, my choice 1 was general surgery, my choice 2 was emergency medicine. Okay, and after I cleared the MMI, I was sent an invite via email saying that you have been shortlisted to come attend the specialty interview for general surgery. Okay, so I got called for option 1 only. Back then, when it got introduced, fun story, my batch was the first batch which they introduced the specialty interview. Before that, there were only 2 steps. So just had the MRE followed by the MMI, and then you just go. So you really never got to meet the department, or there was never an interview. They just spontaneously decided to announce it during our season. And I had done my MMI, I finished it, and then I was thinking, okay, fine, now everything is out of my hands. I'm just gonna chill and relax and wait for the results to come, and if I get it, I get it. And then one fine day I get an email saying that, oh, you have to come back and attend the specialty interview. And none of us had any idea what it was. Is it like going to be a practical exam? Is it going to be are they going to ask you medical questions? Should I go back and read theory? No idea what it was. So everybody was clueless. We just went and winged it. And then from the next year onwards, they made it a regular thing. So basically, what the specialty interview is basically, it's just an interview with the department that you have opted to get accepted into. So for example, again, if your option 1 is general surgery, you will get called for the general surgery specialty interview. So you will go for that interview date. The date and time and everything will be mentioned. There will be all the candidates who have been shortlisted from the MMI will be given a particular date and time to attend. It's basically where you get to, or the department gets to meet you. So the panel will consist of the program director, the consultants, might be some teaching faculty on there, and the panel can differ from day to day. So not all the candidates are interviewed in one day. As you know, some specialties have big intakes, so they might be taking up to 11 to 12 to 15 residents per year. When they do that, means that they might probably shortlist like maybe thrice or four times that amount of people to interview. So interviewing that many people in one day is really not mentally, it's very difficult. Probably you can't give your best. So that's why usually these interviews are spread out over a few days time. So the panel can vary between day to day, but most of the time certain faculty and the program director are usually fixed members of the panel, and certain other members can change. Like they can be one faculty one day, one faculty another day. So the panel can change depending on the day you get called for. But this is not something that's in your control. This is something that I'm just letting you know for people who are familiar with the department. And because one day they might come and tell you, oh, you know what, in my interview, Dr. A and Dr. B were there, and you're thinking, oh, you know what, Dr. A does not really like me, or I've had a bad incident with Dr. A, and then you let that panic you. And the next day, Dr. A might not even be there. Or the other way around. You might think, oh, you know what, Dr. B is amazing and he loves me. So I'm just gonna, not bring my A game because I know he's gonna select me in the moment he sees my face. But then you go and he's not there. So don't let that affect you at all. The panel is variable. So that's probably tip number one. So before we get into tips, what the specialty interview is basically, it is just a job, like a job interview basically, where you will have this panel sitting in front of you, and they're gonna ask you questions related to, yourself. So they will ask you things like, tell us about yourself, tell us about your weaknesses, tell us about your strengths, tell us a difficult situation you have handled. Now this is all more or less personal questions. They're not gonna be questions targeted towards your knowledge or your skills. The specialty interview is targeted, the focus of the specialty interview is that the department can get to know you as a person, right? Because they have been given all the information. So they have your GPAs, they have your shortlisting scores, they have your CV, your personal statement, your recommendation letters, your MMI score. All the on-paper information is in front of them. And they have actually combed through all of these information and then decided to shortlist a few of you to interview, right? Now, so the specialty interview, again, they are not going to go back and question you on these things. So they're not going to go back and ask you about your score or test you on your theory, because they already have the information in front of them. They need to now assess you personality wise, okay, in terms of, oh, does this person seem like a good fit for my department? Does this person feel like somebody who I can mold into, a specialist in this particular field? So these are the things that they're trying to evaluate in a very short time. And mind you, this is actually a timed event. So there will be a particular time, it's not like an open time slot. There is a particular time slot that's given to each candidate and each panel to interview that candidate, which means that in that short time, they also have to make a decision as to whether you're going to, be a good fit or no. So they're not going to waste it on things they already have. They're going to try to find out things that they don't already know, which are going to be really more or less personal things like strengths, weaknesses, etc. So if it's just going to be a job interview, and I know that for people medical students, you're not ever considering giving a job interview, right? All of our tests and assessments have always been on knowledge and theory and written exams and stuff. So you're not very familiar with the job interview process. So it's very natural to hear this and be I have no idea how to sit for a job interview. But we're probably the only people who don't know how to do that after graduation, because literally every other college degree, once you finish, the point is to apply for a job, but you're just going to have a job interview. They're not going to have an entrance examination or something. They're just going to have a job interview, right? Which is why it's the easiest thing in the world to find these kinds of questions, what are the most common questions, and then have an idea of what they might ask you. Now, I have mentioned a few of these here, which are the very common ones that are asked, tell us about yourself, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, tell us an incident in which you felt like you could have, you learned something, etc., etc. So these are the questions. How can you find them? The specialty interview, which is what it's called in the MBRU phases, is actually just a panel interview. That's the general terminology used for it. If you just go to Google and type down most common panel interview questions or panel interview questions with sample answers, so you're going to get a lot of videos, a lot of resources where they will tell you what are the most common questions, and you will have an idea of what you can expect them to ask you. Does this mean that 100% of the questions are going to come from this? Absolutely not. But a good 70 to 80% of questions are very easily going to come from the most common kind of panel interview questions. Okay. Now, I know these questions are not something that sounds like you can prepare for, because again, they sound very, they sound very like casual questions, like conversation questions. How can you prepare for conversation? This is one big mistake that people make, and I am here to tell you why. Now, imagine that you are in a high pressure scenario, which you will be in because you really want to get into this residency program. You've already gone through a lot in terms of phase 1 and phase 2, and you've made it this far. You have a team of consultants sitting there who are not intimidating, but could be intimidating. They're like sitting there and they're like every move you make is being assessed. So you're not going to be very level-headed and very clear-headed that day, okay? They're going to ask you something really simple. Give us an incident in your life where you feel like you handled poorly, okay? Now, I'm sitting there and trying to comb through the last, 20 plus years of my life, trying to find that incident in my head. Do you think that's a good look? That you are sitting there and they're trying to find something that you can say, and you're like, well, there was this one time, and then you start talking over, and then you realize, oh no, that's not a great scenario that I have to talk about. Then you think about, okay, fine, but no, forget that. I'm going to tell you another scenario. So there was this another time that I was in this place and this happened, and then you see what I mean? It doesn't feel smooth. It doesn't feel very like natural, even though that is natural, even though that's like your natural response, right? Now, how preparing for the panel interview helps is that when you know these questions beforehand, for example, I know these are the most common questions. So they're going to ask me something like, oh, what is an incident in your life or in your career where you have faced XYZ? What I'm going to do is I'm going to think of a scenario, and then I'm going to remember that, oh, if I am asked this question, I'm going to talk about this scenario. Okay, and you can do that for multiple things. So they're going to ask you, what are your strengths? You're going to be like, oh, you know what? These are my strengths. I think this I can play on very well. So I'm going to use these strengths of mine, and I'm going to use this example from my life as an answer to that question. Weaknesses, same. Good, experience that has, taught you something, experience that has like given you a lesson to learn. All of these common questions, you can shortlist some things, and then you can keep that. At least you will have the seed as to which you have to use to grow your answer, okay? The other alternative, or the other extreme of the spectrum, is people who over prepare, okay? So you're gonna go through all of these panel interviews. For example, the most common question that you might be asked is, oh, tell us about yourself, or oh, what are your biggest strengths or weaknesses? This is like a very common, very, very like 80% chance you might get asked these questions. So you might be like, have memorized the whole thing. So you have written it down, all the points, and you have practiced it with your friends or your family, and they're going to ask you, tell us about your strengths. And you just start like a tape recorder. That also doesn't look really well, right? Because again, it's not supposed to be something where you're gonna come like with a well-rehearsed, well-prepared answer that sounds excellent on paper. It's not an essay competition. It's not a speech competition. It's again, an opportunity for them to get to know you. So please don't also over-prepare. Just know I'm going to be talking about or touching these points when I'm talking, and try to make it like a very casual conversation. Because if you sound very, very like within a confined box, they're immediately gonna be like, oh, you know what, this candidate is boring. They are just like over prepared and come here, and they're just like talking like a tape recorder, and they don't have a personality to show us. So it's gonna look it's gonna not give a good impression. You see what I mean? Okay. So that's the most important thing you need to know about preparation is that can you prepare? Yes. Must you prepare? 100% yes. Must you memorize and over prepare and have everything ready and like with notes and flashcards? Absolutely not. Okay. So that's the first thing that I have to tell you about preparation for the specialty interview. The second thing I have to tell you is, so there will be a lot of questions focused around negative things. For example, a very simple question is, what are your weaknesses? Or another question is, okay, what is a situation in which you have behaved rudely to a colleague or something, in that line. Now, the trick to answering these questions, and you will find this again in Google, all the videos will explain to you how to use this to your advantage, especially a lot of negative questions have a really nice way of being tackled. So whenever you're asked a negative question, you have to always be like, oh, you know what? I don't have any weaknesses. I'm 100% awesome. I've never had an experience that's negative. No, that's not the way to go. They want you to show your human side, but they also want to see that side of you, which says that, hey, you know what? I have 1, 2, 3 flaws, but I'm working on one. I'm working on these and it's getting better. And, I've realized that, and then I'm doing something to improve on that, right? So for example, you can say that, let's say for a really, just a very hypothetical example, they're going to ask you, okay, tell us about your weaknesses. So you can say stuff like, I feel like I am not really great at working under pressure. I feel like when I'm under pressure, I might not be able to perform really well. But in the past, when I have been given certain situations where I have been put under pressure, I have felt that I am able to learn from those experiences, and over time I do feel like I am learning, I'm getting out of that habit. And as I get into more situations like that, I feel like I can turn that weakness into a strength. I might ask you a question like, how? So I feel like when I'm under pressure, I tend to overanalyze. I tend to see everything very, very detailedly. Just that I feel very anxious also at the time. Maybe if I can take the anxiety out of the equation and just focus on the fact that, oh, that anxiety is also giving me hypervigilance, I can just take that and then use that to my advantage. And that's what I've been trying to do. So right now, what I've said, this is completely off the top of my head, okay? Because again, years of practice and doing these things. But what I'm saying is, this comes with practice, and it's something that comes only with practice. So the more you practice these kinds of scenario, the more you're going to be able to tackle a question that you've never heard of before as well. Because from all your preparation of points of, oh, with question A, I can use scenario A. With question B, I can use scenario 2. One of these scenarios, you might be able to twist to answer a question XYZ that you have never encountered in any of the sample resources. You see what I mean? So that's number 2. Number 3 tip point, which I would recommend, and I kept saying this name on my video as well, is that you always need a buddy, like a practice buddy to bounce out of, because it's very easy to formulate these answers in your head or on paper or whatever format you use, but it's an entirely different ballgame to convert all of those thoughts into words and into a conversation. Okay, that only comes with muscle memory, with your tongue moving and everything. So what's gonna happen is that you're gonna want to keep practicing with a buddy, so that there is no real mismatch between what you're thinking and what you're saying. Okay, so that's tip number 3. Tip number 4, and this is the most important thing that I have to tell everybody, is that a lot of people think that, in this interview, they're looking for a candidate who has ABC qualities, and they try to force themselves to be that kind of a personality, right? So they're going to be like, oh, I need to look confident, I need to sound confident, I need to radiate this kind of persona, even if that is not their actual persona and their persona is far away from it. And that really backfires, because the panel interviewers are not idiots. They have seen thousands of candidates. So when you walk in with a fake personality, they will pick it up in a split second, and they will know that you are trying to pretend to be someone who you are not, which will give them the impression that you are not really comfortable with who you are, because maybe who you actually are is not a great fit. It just gives the absolute wrong impression. Okay, the idea is not to be somebody else, the best version of what you feel a candidate should be. The idea is to be the best version of yourself. including flaws and all. So don't be afraid to talk about your flaws, or like to, you know, that your flaws will be seen. Just know that you have to authentically be yourself, and that is your best bet, because again, like I said, they are looking to assess you in terms of personality, because they are going to accept you into their family, right? So the residency program is a long program, and you're going to be spending a lot of time in the department with their team, with their senior residents, and they need to know that you are a good fit, and a fake personality is not the way to go. So that's about all the tips and tricks I have, I think, for the panel interview. Like I said, there's not really much. This is going to be a brief video. The other thing that I would, just the final outro part that I want to mention, is that you've made it this far. Okay, if you've reached the specialty interview, it means that you are good. Okay, so have that confidence that if I can get this far, I can get beyond. Okay, please be on time. I don't think I have to say, that's why I didn't mention it, but please don't think that it bodes well if you show up late. Come an hour, 2 hours early, plan, prepare, whatever. Please be on time, and come with the right amount of confidence that you have what it takes. Okay, don't be arrogant. Don't go and sit there and make it seem like they're doing you a favor by hiring you. That also doesn't do well. But also don't go and sit there like, you know, like you don't belong here, and then they would be really like, and it would be a favor to you if they hire you as well, right? So just go as yourself, go confident, practice beforehand so that you are well as prepared as can be. Practice with a buddy, and then just go there and be yourself. A lot of interviews turn out to be really fun experiences because they might pull your leg and they'll see how you react. So just take it easy, take it like a conversation. Don't try to put the weight of this whole thing on your head, be like, oh, if I don't do this then I won't get accepted, and then don't let that bother you. Just take it as it comes and do your best, and then if you just are the best version of yourself that day, that will be shown and they will pick you, I'm sure. So that's it. We have finally completed the 3-part process of this whole thing, and there's still a few more things that we need to discuss. Like I know CV, personal statement, all of these things are pending and that they will be coming up. But I think this is a good enough start because all the processes have been explained. There are tips and tricks as to how to get into how to tackle each step. So I'm really, really proud that we've gotten this far. Hopefully we will get to the other 2 as well before time runs out. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.